In Pokemon Go, Medicham has a breakpoint that allows it to dominate the mirror matchup. Back in my Medicham PvP IV deep dive I did a few years ago, I cautioned against going for this mirror slaying Medicham unless you were in a situation where you knew you were going to be fighting a whole bunch of Medicham mirrors. And that is exactly where ItsAXN found himself in the 2023 Pokemon Go World Championships. With the recent update in Pokemon Go as well, Medicham is more powerful and more meta than ever, so you may be finding yourself in the Medicham mirror matchup pretty frequently in GBL as well. So in this video, I figured I'd demystify the mirror slaying Medicham a bit more for you than what the deep dive does, and let you know what you need to know about the Medicham mirror. So this ain't the Medicham PvP IV deep dive, I already did that. Link above and in the description if you want to check that out. I guess you could think of this as more of the mirror Medicham PvP IV deep dive. Starting out, we have the humble Medicham versus Medicham mirror matchup using two rank 1 non-best buddy Medichams with their 105.8 attack stats. And if you scroll down here, you can see the breakpoints. If you were to pump that attack stat up to 107.95, then you could get a breakpoint against the opposing Medicham. Of course, you also have to be wary of your own defense stat. If you are pumping up your attack a little bit higher, you will still want to maintain a bit of a defense stat here, because if you drop this too low, well then even the rank 1 Medicham will be able to also get that breakpoint right back at you, taking away the breakpoint advantage, although you would still be able to get a charge move priority advantage. But the whole point of using the mirror slaying Medicham is to dominate them by getting the 4 damage per counter attack and denying them the 3 damage per counter attack. So clicking on this for an example here, you can see how right now we're tying the mirror matchup. It's CMP ties all over the place. If you were to have this breakpoint, now you have a very clear and defined win. And you can see here that, well, yes, it is winning off of charge move priority, but if they were to dip out of this matchup, they'd be far more bruised than they were before, and there will be scenarios where that extra chip damage based on what's thrown and what's baited will allow you to beat them with just the fast move damage. And this is exactly the kind of Medicham that ItsAXN used to dominate the 2023 World Championships, his specific build being the 9-14-6. With this build, he's getting that attack breakpoint, he's maintaining that higher defense stat, but it is going to be costing him his stamina. Now, if you only need about 108 attack to get this mirror breakpoint, why go for an even higher attack stat? Well, there's two factors here. Factor one is that we can't control our PvP IVs in the current state of the game, so you have to work with what you got. If you check out your Medicham IVs and you notice that you have that higher attack stat and you know that you've got that higher defense stat to protect yourself against other Medicham, well, then that's what you've got for having a mirror slaying Medicham, right? Another factor that could be important with the attack stat is you might not be up against the rank 1 non-best buddy Medicham, you could be up against the rank 1 best buddy Medicham. And personally, I feel like if you're going to be foregoing your attack stat to pump up your bulk with being a best buddy, you may as well go for the maximum bulk best buddy Medicham. So a big, thick 141.1 defense stat. And if you were to be up against such an opponent, you can check here on pvpoke.com that you would need a 108.6 attack stat. So having that thicker attack beyond just 108 attack could pay off in those kind of situations. Another thing to keep in mind with the defense stat is that you don't want to just defend yourself against the rank 1 Medicham. You might want to think about higher attack weighted Medichams as well. From my Medicham PvP IV deep dive, the best of both worlds Medicham that I recommend there is the 7-15-14. ItsAXN himself in his live stream where he talked about his matchups at Worlds and his PvP IVs. Link in the description to that VOD if you haven't checked it out yet. It's pretty insightful. I like it a bit more than other VODs from people that have won tournaments because he actually highlights when a breakpoint advantage is helping him out in a matchup. So it can kind of help you visualize just how much PvP IVs can matter in these high-end battles. But both of us agree that for a middle-of-the-road, best-of-both-worlds kind of Medicham, 7-15-14 is it. It's not going to get you that attack breakpoint against the rank 1 Medicham, but it could get you CMP and could get you the breakpoint against some lesser Medichams. And then on top of that, you still maintain enough of a defense stat to protect yourself against opposing Medicham that could be trying to get a breakpoint in the mirror. And then you also have a bigger stamina stat, which can help you in a large variety of matchups. So if you consider that attack stat, then the defense stat you're going to want too is about 139. And you can see the AXN build here is rocking a 139.4 defense stat. So overall, a very solid Medicham that is fortified for the mirror matchup. Swing on over to PvPIVs.com. If you want to figure out for yourself if your Medicham is cut out to be a mirror slayer, then what you'd have to do is go to the defense here and type in 139. And then go to the attack, and 108 is the minimum if you want to be prepared for like even higher defense Medicham, like the maximum bulk best buddy Medicham, then you can make this 108.6. And checking out here, you can see that the ItsAXN build does make the top 20. There are probably hundreds, 115 different Medicham IVs that would be able to, you know, satisfy these conditions here. Of course, having a higher attack weight will give you higher chance for the CMP, but the HP could cause you some issues. Let me illustrate for you here with the 13-15-1. Yeah, if the ItsAXN build found itself against the 13-15-1, it would be losing the 0-0 and the 2-2 shield situation off of charge move priority based on which moves were thrown, which moves were shielded. But when it comes to the 1-1 shield scenario, you can see that the AXN build is having that greater HP and it is able to overcome this matchup. So how much HP do we need for these Medicham mirrors? Well, from what I've found, having a minimum of 135 HP is valuable for the 2-1 potential matchup and the 2-2 shield scenario. So just maintaining that HP. Obviously here we had so much of an attack stat that it was able to break through that. Yeah, it can be kind of hard to see with that previous Medicham because it has such an exaggerated attack, defense, and HP stat. But if you were to go like 1 HP lower than the ItsAXN build, then you can clearly see how having that 135 HP could help you out there. And then when it comes to the 1-2 shield scenario, so it'd come down to charge move priority in this kind of situation, and because I mean this is mirror versus mirror, assuming your opponent has the lower attack stat, you'd get the charge move priority in the situation to lock in the 2-1 win, which it's a pretty cheeky way to flip around that Medicham mirror matchup. Of course, this is a Slayer v Slayer kind of situation. When it comes to fighting a big bulk Medicham, you don't have to be as strict with the HP stat, depending on which charge moves are thrown, which ones are landed, etc. One complication with the lower HP of the ItsAXN Medicham against a Medicham that is also a Slayer that has a higher HP stat could be in the 0-0 shield situation. By having a 137 HP, you can see that this Medicham here is able to just survive the Ice Punch from the ItsAXN build and then KO him right back with their own Ice Punch. So things can get kind of tricky when you're playing with the stats here with the mirror Medicham matchup. Does this mean that the ItsAXN build is trash compared to the 8-15-9? Well, no, not exactly. Depending on what specific IVs you have to work with, the situation could play out very differently. For example, if you were to be running the 9-15-10, which has that same 137 stamina stat, but has a 0.9 lower defense stat. Against the ItsAXN build specifically, you can see here that we no longer have the defense needed to reduce the damage of the Psychic and reduce the damage of the Ice Punch in order to survive with that just 1 HP left over. So it can be pretty dicey when it comes to Slayer v Slayer. Fortunately for us, all we mostly have to think about and worry about is going to be fighting against high bulk Medicham or lesser IV Medicham. So out of all these 115 IV spreads, which Medicham IV is going to dominate the other Slayers? What is the ultimate Medicham slaying IV spread? And it won't be any one of these IV spreads. If you really want to dominate the Medicham mirror matchup, you have to go a lot deeper, go a little bit darker, sacrifice that defense stat, pump up that stamina stat, so you can find yourself the Slayer. Sorting this by maximum attack, you can see that the 12-0-15 could be the Slayer that we're looking for. And you can see here that the Slayer is doing its job. The ItsAXN build can't even begin to withstand the raw power of the Slayer, even losing in the 2-1 shield scenario. And a lot of it comes down to it having that higher HP to withstand the attacks from the opposing slaying Medicham. You can see here that the Slayer build lands a whole Psychic, and this thing's still trucking along and lands the Ice Punch, is able to survive with just 4 HP left. So if you consider to this, it would be having 139 effective HP to kind of compete with that. This has 142 HP, so the Slayers are pretty potent. The danger with the Slayer though is that you do give up those advantages against the high bulk Medicham. You can see here that the high bulk Medicham is now overcoming you in the 0-0 and the 2-2 shield situations. You flew too close to the sun. In your quest to gain an advantage in both attack, charge move priority, and bulk against opposing Slayer Medicham, you're now tasting it against opposing Medicham. So how do we protect ourselves from these situations? Well, if you look at the 0-0 shield situation in particular, you can see that we're getting KO'd on a 30 damage Ice Punch, and they're also hitting us with a 46 damage Psychic. So if you were to flip these stats around, you can see how much defense you would need in order to survive that. So with our base defense of 127.3, scrolling down, if we wanted to survive the Ice Punch a little bit better, we'd have to have about 130.52. If we wanted to survive the Psychic a little bit better, well, we'd need to have just a baby bit more defense, looking at 127.63. Of course, the rank 1 might not be what we're fighting. We could be fighting something good and reasonable like the 715-14. In that case, we'd need 127.4 to reduce the Ice Punch damage, and we'd need about, oh gosh, 128.89 to reduce the Psychic damage. So plugging that in, like 128.9, maybe 129 to be safe, and then pumping up that attack stat, we got ourselves the 10-1-13. And now you can see that rather than losing to the high bulk Medicham, we are now able to tie against them. Obviously, a little bit more defense would offer a little bit more padding in this situation. The 142 HP seems to be a little bit non-negotiable. So if you were to drop that, so if you wanted to pump up that defense stat even higher, you would have to give up a little bit more attack. But when it comes to the ItsAXN build, like the 9-14-6, you can see that it pays off quite well to have this high attack, low defense, high HP kind of build. So overall, what's the best Medicham? What Medicham should you be using in battle? And overall, just going with a high rank Medicham is probably your best bet. I personally like the 7-15-14 the best because you do have the chance to pick up that breakpoint. You do have a solid defense against slaying Medichams or sloppy Medichams trying to get that breakpoint, and you get the benefits of that higher stamina. One thing that's not focused on in this video, since this is focusing on the Medicham Mirror matchup, is how much dropping your HP stat while chasing the Medicham Mirror, or dropping your defense stat and chasing the Medicham Mirror, trying to be like the Slayer build we just talked about, can hurt you in plenty of other matchups. And there were matchups that ItsAXN highlighted in his VOD. Once again, link in the description if you want to check his VOD out where he highlights his battles. There were matchups that he did lose off of the bulk of his Medicham. There's a KOing Ice Punch that he just misses. There could be KOing Psychics that he just misses because he doesn't have that HP stat anymore to reach it in the non-mirror kind of situation. Of course, in that meta, there was a lot of Medicham mirror action going on, so that's where he was focusing in on trying to get the advantage. If you're just a general player, going high bulk Medicham for just the complete random nonsense, the slot machine that is GBL, you know, any high bulk Medicham will be good. Of course, if you go with one of the Slayer builds here, then you could have that advantage in the mirror depending on the IVs of the opposing Medicham. And when it comes to the Slayer builds, as we discussed in this video, having that higher HP stat of 137 or greater could help you out against an opposing slaying Medicham. Having a higher defense stat could protect you against Medicham that happen to have slightly higher attack weights than, you know, the 7-15-14 that I highlighted. And then having that higher attack stat can give you a greater chance for charge move priority. Here you can see that ItsAXN build having the highest attack weight of them all. At the end of the day, we can't pick and choose our PvP IVs, so, you know, you just got to work with what you got. If you happen to have any of these IV builds, then it would be worthwhile to star that Medicham and think about maybe building it in the future, especially if you want to get an advantage in the mirror matchup. And of course, if you are a play Pokemon tournament minded person, I think the Slayer build could be pretty cheeky to think about for that specific kind of situation. But when it comes to Go Battle League, like, is this really going to help you out that much? I mean, if you don't have any other Medicham IV spreads to build, then I guess this is what you got to work with, right? But overall, the disadvantages that you'll run into in a great handful of matchups because you're dropping your defense stat so heavily probably outweigh the advantages that you could get if you happen to run into a Slayer build, particularly in the field. But if you are at a Play Pokemon tournament, you could scout out your opponents. You notice somebody's getting a breakpoint against a Medicham in a previous matchup. That's probably a Slayer build, right? And it's going to be difficult for people to discern if you're just a sloppy Medicham or if you are actually a Slayer Medicham. And when you line up against an opponent and you know their Medicham is a Slayer from observing them in previous matchups, and they don't know that you're the Slayer, well, you could be flipping them in ways that they never expected to have flipped before. Unless they watch this video and then they'd lose and be like, dang, he was a Slayer. Ryan Swag told me about this. Holy shit. At any rate, that's all I got to say about the Medicham mirror matchup right now. If you got any questions on this content, of course, comment below. Let me know what's up, and I'll be happy to help you out. If you enjoyed this kind of content, you want to see more like it, well, make sure to subscribe to SwagTips. I'd also like to give a special shout out to these Patreon supporters. If you want to support Swagman on Patreon, link in the description. When editing, I noticed that AXN's VOD was no longer on his Twitch, so if you're curious about the other PvP IVs of his team, we have the high defense Lantern with the bit of the HP stat, just like I highlight in the Lantern PvP IV deep dive, very potent against the Altaria, which he expected to fight a lot of. We have a Noctowl that is weighted for the Azumarill and the Galarian Stunfisk, so pretty standard slight attack weighted Noctowl here, just like in the Noctowl PvP IV deep dive. We have the rank 1 Shadow Alolan Sandslash here, which is kind of crazy improbable that he has this, but here we are. We also have a high attack weighted Sableye, like from the Sableye PvP IV deep dive, with the intention of getting charge move priority against Venusaur and Swampert, and of course the mirror matchup. Then we have his Shadow Swampert here, which was CMP minded, although we never did get to see it in action because he was just terrified of all the Altaria and Venusaur that were out there, but good bench pressure and mind games regardless.